Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel. We are watching the daily news analysis. So, as always, we are referring to the Hindu newspapers Delhi edition. Okay, so let's see the front page first. And this is the front page. You have a holistic idea of what all things were there in today's newspaper. Okay, so first of all, let us see what has happened in Sri Lanka. So this is an update actually. So Sri Lanka's former president Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he has fled to Singapore. He wanted to go outside, so he has fled and he has tendered his resignation. So Ranil Wickremesinghe would be in charge of Sri Lanka for the time being. Okay. Next is very important. It is from the point of view of General Studies 3. So we have an update from Ministry of Finance on the macroeconomic indicators or macroeconomic challenges that the country faces. So we all know there is inflation issue. There is the issue of rising fiscal deficit, and also current account deficit. Now the finance ministry is saying is that we have been able to control the fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit means the government spending expenditures minus the revenues. So that is under control. We have been able to keep it in check. That's fine. But our imports, the value of our imports are much more than what we are exporting. So our current account deficit is very high. So this can be because of obviously Russia-Ukraine crisis, the depreciation of the currency, the rising crude prices, the outflow of money from India to outside, foreign portfolio investments going outside, US increasing their Fed rate. So all these issues would be a reason. So that they have said. So current account deficit remains very high and inflation is also very high. It remains sticky. So this they call it as twin challenges. You understand, two problems are there. Now when I say twin challenges, actually one more term comes to my mind. Twin deficit. Twin deficit. So what is twin deficit? Twin deficit is a condition that is there is a high fiscal deficit and current account deficit. What Sri Lanka faces today is an example of a twin deficit. Okay, just a second. So this is what it is saying. Now, from pre-point of view, some basic understanding, and given the nature of questions that are being asked in the mains, they are asking static type of questions also. Okay, so first is this current account deficit. So what is this? So current account deficit is basically the shortfall between the money received by selling products. I don't like the definition actually. It's basically the more outflow of money from the country minus the money that is coming inside the country. The definition that they have given over here in the business standard is actually a definition of trade deficit or balance of trade. That's why I don't like the definition. Now the question arises, what is the difference between current account deficit and balance of trade? Right. So let us see the constituents of the current account deficit. So trade of goods and services, naturally export and import of goods and services, that is coming under trade deficit. We are importing more, exporting less in value. So that would be trade deficit. But there are other ways also by which the money is going outside and coming inside of a country, which is not in the form of capital investment. So capital investment is like India giving a loan or Indians giving a loan to a foreign entity. So they're creating an asset outside. Or when we are borrowing, it's creating a liability that we have to pay back that money. So that is capital. So which is not capital, but it is amounting to inflow and outflow of money, besides trades of goods and services. So that will also come under current account deficit. For example, India giving a grant or money for humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. So those are examples, or remittances. So those are examples which are, not trade of goods and services, neither they are part of capital account. Okay, so we are done with these two concepts. And I was saying that it can be asked in the mains. So what I really mean is, we had a question on the constituents of the components of the budget. So that way it had asked previously, I think 2021. So likewise, UPSC can ask you what are the key constituents of the balance of payment account mentioned in the budget, or distinguish between current account deficit and balance of trade or trade deficit, or differentiate between balance of payment and balance of trade. Such questions can also be asked. So this was important. I wanted to discuss. I hope this is clear. Next, this is about an update on monkeypox case. So Kerala reports India's first monkeypox case, right? So not a good sign. And Kerala, I don't know why, but Kerala remains the first state normally to have all these viruses. So Nipah virus, whatever it is, it normally tends to come from Kerala. Maybe it's a coastal area. There are a lot of people who are in Dubai and other places. So maybe that could be the reason. Okay. Now there was an article at the later stage of the newspaper from the World Health Organization. So they said that we have had only one reported incident of fatality. This is not fatal. Okay. Now let us see about the monkeypox also. So we need to know some basic details. So monkeypox is a rare disease, right? Rarely we hear about them. So it's an infection which is caused by the virus. It is from the same family of viruses as variola virus. Now this is something that can be asked, and it is rarely fatal, but it is fatal. It can be fatal. SC absolves forces of Dantewada killings. So Dantewada is a place in Chhattisgarh. So there was this allegation against the paramilitary forces, the CRPF, etc. So state police forces, that they have engaged in massacring of tribal people. So wrong conduct has taken place via the security agencies. So it turns out that this thing, on the case of human right violation, this thing was being heard at the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has found that these allegations are wrong. Right, these allegations are wrong, and they have imposed a fine on Himanshu Kumar, who was doing this. Okay, so this is there. So they have found this to be wrong. A lot of investigation would have taken place in that regard. So we agree. Okay, fine. Now see, we get certain things. Okay. So one is GS3, internal security, about Naxalism. And within the topic of Naxalism, there is a concept of urban Naxalism. And when we talk about Naxalism, there is another thing that, Naxalites, these militants, are creating unrest in the tribal areas, in the forested areas where there is lack of development. And they are using frontal fronts or frontal organizations which create a narrative that police, authorities, etc. are engaging in wrongful conduct with reference to the tribals. Maybe this can be attributed to that. Right, so urban Naxalism, so urban areas, people who are supporting Naxalisms or who are defaming the state, so like that. So this is it on this thing, and I was doing additional reading, so that's it actually, not more is required. Okay, now moving on to the next page. So this is the I think you can see the entire layout. So these are the news over here. So first is riot case charge sheet filed in casual manner. So again, we this is the riots that took place with reference to the Citizenship Amendment Act, that protest that was going on. So what we find is, what the court found was that the police had failed to investigate incidents. Now we make this a theme about the poor quality of investigations of the police or the need for the police reforms. Assault on Sharjeel Imam. Fine. So in jail something has happened. Now we can take this as custodial torture. Right? Yeah, custodial torture, police brutality, need for prison reforms. So this topic is relevant from that context. Yeah. Next is we have a news on the Delhi Commission for Women seeks reasons for delays in medico legal cases of rape survivors. MLC means medico legal cases. That's it. Why the reasons are taken? What are the reasons for this delay? So those things have been asked by the chairperson of the Delhi Commission for Women. Now the question arises, Delhi Commission for Women, and why I'm doing this is that we normally study about the National Commission for Women, but ignore the State Commission for Women. So we get a news about DCW, and it tells us how they are what is their intervention with reference to something wrong that is taking place, or something to do with the women. So we should know basics about it. So one is obviously the National Commission for Women at the national level. You should know that this is a statutory body. It's there in your Lakshmikant also. What all things they do? And in UPSC mains, the question was asked about an appraisal of the functioning or the performance of the NCW in protecting women's welfare. And yes, there is another concept known as citizen charter. When every time I'm teaching governance in coachings and I asked about, have you seen citizen charter? They said no, students. So here is citizen charter, and you can get everything. It's not yeah. So here is the citizen charter, and you can get everything that they are doing. What all things are there? What are the timelines? So we can get it from here. A question has already been asked on the citizen charter. Okay. Now I was searching for the State Commission for Women directly. I was not getting about this. So National Commission for Women is a statutory body. It was created by an act of the Parliament. So we have commissions for respective states. So I opened for Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh. So all of them are naturally statutory body, and they are created by the law of the respective state legislature. It seems to be consequent of the act that was created by the Parliament, like National Commission for Women. Because see the year over here. So this is very close to the act that was created by the Parliament. Now, what all things do they do? We get it. Right. And this will be looking into the issues of the complaints of the women with reference to the state against the state within the state. And when we talk about the National Commission for Women, National Commission for Women can also look at the need for intervention for both complaints arising from the central government as well as the state government. Now back to the Hindu newspaper. Yeah, ward limitation exercise likely to start from Monday. Where? Delhi. See, you would have studied about Delimitation Commission. And what is delimitation, by the way? Delimitation is the exercise of delimiting boundaries of the constituencies. So wherever elections are going to take place, so they have to mark the constituency, right? So constituencies borders have to be created. So that is done by the Delimitation Commission when it comes to the Lok Sabha elections as well as the state elections. But at the level of local bodies, who does this? At the level of center, we get it. Parliament is empowered to create a law under the constitution for creation of delimitation commissions. But what is happening at the level of the local body elections? So here we get that the MHA, this is Delhi, so Delhi is not a complete state. So the Ministry of Home Affairs, Union, has formed a 3-member delimitation committee, which will include the state election commissioner. And I was thinking Delhi is not a full-fledged state. Let's look at Kerala or some other state. So I got it for Kerala, and normally the websites are good. Okay. So we get it. Delimitation exercise has been stipulated at Article 243C and R of the Constitution. So this is basically done by the state election commissions. Even with Delhi also Panchayat elections, it was being done by the state election commissions. So formerly in this place, formerly it was being done, formerly vested in the state election commission, the delimitation exercise. But from now on, there will be a delimitation commission consisting of the state election commissioner. Right, and this provision has been created via the amendment to the Kerala Panchayat Raj Act and Kerala Municipality Act. So this is a law that was created by the state legislature. So respective state legislature, they are enacting because it says Kerala. Okay, so there we go on this topic. Now coming back to this newspaper. So I'm not doing this tribal at the top. This is about the presidential elections. Okay. Maharashtra slashes VAT on petrol, diesel. Then we have center's reply to the ecologically sensitive zone issue positive. So ecologically sensitive zone, I think this should be clear. You know, they're talking about the Western Ghats, and you can imagine the Western Ghats mentally that it borders along the western coast, the western side of the peninsula region. So a Supreme Court had ordered in one of the judgments that that area 1 kilometer radius, 1 kilometer of the limits of the national park. So this is the border of the national park. So 1 kilometer from that has to be set aside as ecologically sensitive zone. Now, when the government says that this is an ecologically sensitive zone, that means there are restrictions on commercial activities, on settlement of people. So there are limitations over there. So Kerala is naturally objective because 1 kilometer of land is quite a lot. Typically, you know, it is required because it's a buffer zone, but this is still a lot. So Kerala says that we are going to appeal against this. They were also consulting the concerned minister at the central level, so Bhupender Yadav. So center says, don't worry, we are going to take this issue because there are, apart from Kerala, there are other states also. Karnataka is there, Maharashtra is there, so there are other states. So all of them have a concern and we'll look into this. Okay, again we have rising Godavari cuts off Bhadrachalam, right? So Bhadrachalam is a temple town. Temple town means important. Okay, fine. So we have this. Okay, I don't have it. Bhadrachalam. Let me just Google this 1 second. Yeah, right. So you get some. It's on the banks of Godavari River, and it has documented history of Lord Shri Ram. It is referred to as Ayodhya Puri in the movie Sri Ramadasu. Okay, fine. Where are we? Yeah. Okay. Oh. Now we are on the editorial and opinion page. You can see the topics over here. Okay. Now I'm not doing this. This is about the Kerala internal party politics. Then this is about Gotabaya quitting Sri Lanka's this thing. So not of interest. India needs bridging the gap. You know, this gender parity index that was gender gap index, sorry. So that was there in the news, global gender gap, which was released by the World Economic Forum, and India is ranked very, very poorly in that. So here we have certain indicators. For example, India ranked first in the health category. So why I'm sharing this is I'm just doing this part. Because we get certain indicators which you can freely use in your answer writing. Like in the healthcare, we are doing bad according to the National Family Health Survey. Then reduction in the women participation in the labor force has shrunk. Right, it has shrunk over here. So earlier it was 15% in 2016, 15% women were looking for employment. Now this metric has dropped to 9.2%. Then representation of women in the leadership position is less, so we need to enhance that. So we get certain indicators. Read this in your free this thing. I've shared it in the Telegram also. I was very optimistic about this article. But this article is about, obviously, it's about a critical appraisal of the draft disability policy. I was expecting more on this thing, but it is only talking about the shortcomings with reference to disability and their participation in the political sphere, or the representation of disabled in the political. So this was, I was expecting more over here. So it doesn't talk much about the political upliftment of the persons with disability. Okay, let's do this. This is still, there are a lot of things for us important. So you see, it's about disability policies, about the long-term vision of the government with reference to the disabled. So what all things they have to do. Disability is a problem, GS1. So GS2 also, if the what is the government doing with reference to disabled, social justice. Okay. Now we have certain fact things over here. So first of all, we enacted a Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. So this was enacted in 2016, which was in lines of India signing a convention, a United Nations Convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. Then there is also another convention which deals with the issue of disabled. So this is known as Incheon Commitment. So Incheon is in South Korea. So, you know, a question can be asked like Incheon Commitment is associated with which of the following? Okay, so Incheon Strategy for Asia and Pacific Decade of Persons with Disabilities. 2013 to 2022 would be a decade for persons with disabilities. Then this is again a very interesting viewpoint which says that traditionally when we are looking at the issue of disabled, we are looking at it from the health perspective, like it's a medical condition. So we are following a medical model of disability. We should also focus, we should move away from this and also focus on the social or human rights model of disabilities. So this aspect also has to be looked into. Okay, so this is something that has been sidelined over here. And then he says that this policy, the recent policy, is focusing on multiple domains like education, healthcare, skill development, sports and culture, social security. So number of ways it is looking at it, but there is a glaring omission or shortcoming, that is, it is not doing enough for political upliftment of persons with disabilities. Now, when we talk about this thing, it basically means he's talking about political upliftment. So one is the participation in the voting process. So naturally, many of our polling booths are not disabled friendly. So maybe accessing it via wheelchair or having the slope to reach that. So that is not there. So accessing the polling booth, there is a barrier in participation. So that is there. Then even in the party politics, we hardly find leaders who represent disabled. Okay. Then, yeah, so lack of representation is there. Then they are not using this Braille electronic voting machine, so that addition could be done. So those improvements have to be done over here. Now there are few states who have begun an initiative on this at local levels to increase participation of the disabled. So at least we have reference of Chhattisgarh, which has started the initiative of nominating at least one disabled person in each panchayat. Right, so this is a good thing. Further, it says what are the things that needs to be done. So it recommends 4-pronged approach. So one, it says that we need to increase the capacity of disabled people's organization. So capacity building has to be done, training should be done, capacity building. Then other thing is looking at the legal and regulatory framework. Third is inclusion of civil societies in observation work in policy making, etc. Right, so this should be done. So I'll do this a bit more because this is only talking about from the political perspective. I haven't read this article. We'll get more opportunities. Is protectionism compatible with liberalization? Yeah, and we had a lot actually today. So we have an article, we have an explainer on the forest conservation rules. Now, before going forward, we have a Forest Conservation Act. So Forest Conservation Act, as the name goes, it is about conserving forest. It is about protecting the forest from diversions. Naturally, forest is a land only. Land can be diverted for developmental activities, for commercial activities. It has to be protected. So some stringent norms should be there. So this is coming from the Forest Conservation Act. Now, not to confuse with the Forest Rights Act, because Forest Rights Act is about talking about the rights of the forest dwellers, that is tribals. Forest Conservation Act is providing for provisions with safeguards the conversion of forest land for some other activity, for non-forest use. So this is done over here. Now it says, so let's go behind this. So when we're talking about the forest conservation rules, these are rules created by the executive for the implementation of the Forest Conservation Act, right? It is associated with this law. Fine. So this has been there in the, disagreements are there between the opposition and the ruling party at this moment. Okay. Now, what this thing says is the Forest Conservation Act. It says that if there is a forest land, naturally talks about protection. If there is a forest land that goes beyond 5 hectares, then approval is required for diverting land. Whose approval? The central government. So their approval is required, and from central government, it is actually the Forest Advisory Committee that looks into this issue. Fine. So if it is less than 5 hectares, it is the state government. But if it is more than 5 hectares, if the land is to be diverted, so according to the Forest Conservation Act, it has to be approved by a committee of the central government. That is Forest Advisory Committee. Okay, so though they look into it, they see if the rightful thing has been done, and then they give the approval or reject it. We pause over here. For convenience. We are not going directly with this article, flow of the article. Now read this. In 2009, forest conservation rules, right? So new set of rules were introduced in 2019, which it said that before the approval, before the FSC stage, the FSC must consider that the states have ensured that the forest rights have been settled with the Gram Sabha. That is, people's view has been taken into account, people's consent has been taken, and then the Forest Advisory Council gives their sanction. Are you clear? So land more than 5 hectares, if it has to be diverted, the approval of FSC is required, which is central government. In 2009, it made it mandatory that the state has to provide this proof that the forest rights of the tribals, the people who live in the forest, these have been protected, these have been settled, their consent has been taken, and then the center gives approval. So there is a concern over here that this stage has been violated, this requirement has been diluted. So now they are saying that after the approval is given, then the FRA thing, the rights of the forest, the settlement of the tribal issue will be looked into. So the role of the center, you see, is limited to this approval, and then the issue of the settlement with the tribals will take place. So there is a concern that it undermines the rights and the welfare of the tribals. In fact, that word itself has been removed. Right, so the word has been removed. I'm not able to find that. So this is there. And they're saying that it is mentioned in the Forest Rights Act, so that will deal with it. Now the center is saying that the idea here is not to curb the Forest Rights Act. It is only, we are not making any changes. We are only streamlining the process. Right, streamlining the process over here. So that is the overall goal over here. And according to this, it will help increase the forest cover. And there is also an issue, recently, like Delhi said that we do not have adequate land, so we need forest. We need to divert the forest. Let us allow afforestation or diversion of this, let us allow us to give land to a different area, in a different state. So that should be permitted. So compensatory forest in a different state should be done. So this provision is, they aim to solve this problem of states not finding enough land in their jurisdiction, which implies that in other jurisdiction they can do that. Latest point of contention is the absence of wording in the updated forest conservation rules of what happens to tribals and forest dwelling communities. Right, so this is what I was saying. Okay, the road to labor codes. So labor codes, I believe, is very, very important from the point of view of GS3. Now, obviously, we should know what are the labor codes. So I'm briefly doing this. So, we have a very complicated system of regulation, labor regulations. So there are about 100 state laws and about 29 central laws. So too many laws. Difficult to implement, difficult to comply with, at least from the point of view of the, if a company has to regulate this, or if you want to start a company, so it will become complicated. So many laws are there, difficult. So the idea of labor code is to consolidate these laws, so many laws, consolidate them. Right, so that is the idea. So there are now 4 labor codes in all. Okay. Now, opposition says that you have created this labor codes, but these are poorly drafted. When it came into the parliament, you got it through in 2 days. No discussion took place. Then the left parties, the workers, they say that these codes are anti-workers. Right, this is there. Now, let us see what are the labor organizations saying. And yes, there one more thing. There is this SP Mukherjee committee which is looking into the issue of the minimum wage. So they are yet to release their findings. So they are yet to complete its task. So this is again one of the codes associated with the labor codes, the code on wages. Now, what are the labor organizations saying, including the RSS one? So they are saying that you have reduced. There were so many laws, now you have reduced them. So that has also led to reduction in regulation. It has led to dilution of labor welfare. So we don't like this. So that is what they're saying. And second thing is saying, please don't implement this in one go. Please do it in a phased manner. I think we have it enough. What happens when things are done in one go in totality, right? So it should be done in a phased manner. If there is a problem, you rectify it and it is easier to rectify also. Once the things are streamlined, then you implement at a full-fledged level. Okay, so this is your national news page. So there was an ex-judge who had, the Supreme Court had criticized the Nupur Sharma remarks. So a former High Court judge has criticized the views, the way the Supreme Court judge had criticized. So somebody had filed a contempt. Somebody said that a contempt case should be done on the former Delhi High Court judge. So this should be done. So he's saying that the views of the Attorney General of India was so. So he says that, see, this is a reasonable comment on the judgment. So it is under the realm of fair comment on a hearing. So there is no point of issuing a contempt notice. Right. So contempt of court is again important. Okay, we had an opinion over here on this topic. So political uproar over unparliamentary word list. So some words, if they are said, they will be expunged. Right? So naturally the opposition members, they are not like this. So they said that certain words will be removed. So there is a 50-page document that says ashamed, abused, jumla jivi, tana shahi, snoop gate. So these words will not be taken. Even corrupt will not be taken. So these are unparliamentary words. Now naturally the MPs over here are saying that, especially from the opposition, because these words are used to criticize or condemn the ruling party. So they say that it is affecting our freedom to express freely. And this is a parliamentary privilege also. You know, the freedom of speech and expression, that reasonable restrictions, they are diluted for the MPs so that they can freely express their views. Okay, so we have monkeypox. So it's like this, maybe this thing happens. So WHO thing that I said. Good, ex-chief of NSE arrested. India to give land for I2U2 backed food parks. But first of all, what is this I2U2? So this is a grouping comprising of India, Israel, UAE and US. Right, so I2U2 is that thing. And it has been said to be a future West Quad. So, you know, Quad grouping, which is looking into the South China Sea issue. So, a Quad for the West, which actually is not, India would not like this because it is kind of a security alliance. And here Iran is not there. So, it becomes complicated over here. These are all adversaries of Iran over here. Okay, so this creates, now this I2U2, wait, I'll show you. Yeah, so this I2U2 is, these countries will work on common areas of mutual interest, which includes water, energy, transport, health, food security, and with the help of private sector capital and expertise. Right, so that is the idea over here. And one of the leaders, Ahmed Albana, ambassador of the UAE to India, had called it a West Asian Quad. Right, so Iran is not there, not mentioned over here. And these, I'll stop. I won't remark beyond this. There was a good reason for this. Okay. So many of these initiatives, one of them is the food parks. Right, so food parks would be created. So what is a food park? Food park is an area where food processing can take place. So farmers can give their foods. There will be logistic capabilities. There will be warehousing capability. There will be some infrastructure where processing can take place. Machines can come up for food processing. All these processed foods that you consume. So India will provide land. India will willingly do it because whichever land gets it, whichever country is providing land, in that country there will be job creation, and India wants job creation, and food processing is a very important thing. In fact, please read about the PM Sampada Yojana. Okay, so that is important. So they are working on this. So food processing again is a very important topic. Our production of vegetables to go up. Well, UPSC asked us a question about the rise in the horticulture production. Separate. It's about the National Horticulture Mission. Okay, so China waits and watches Sri Lanka crisis. Naturally, they'll wait and watch. IMF agrees to resume Pak loan after fuel tax hike. Right. So this is one of the criticisms also, that IMF grants money for ensuring the stability of that economy, but it comes with certain conditions. Okay. US was to use all means to stop Iran nuclear bomb. Okay, so Iran is under sanction. Iran is under sanction because of its suspected nuclear program. Weaponization would take place. So they are under this sanctions are there. Now there has been a meeting in Jerusalem, which is now known as Jerusalem Declaration, actually, because two leaders, Israel's Prime Minister Yair Lapid and US President Joe Biden, have given this statement from there. So US has said that we will do anything and everything that is required to stop Iran from making nuclear bombs. Israel says, see, diplomacy alone will not work. We should be willing to use military force also. So Israel has its own agenda over here. Iran condemns it. Naturally, they will condemn it. Okay, Zelensky urges special tribunal for Russia, and naturally because of this human rights violations, the war crimes that have taken place, and it says the International Criminal Court officials should take note of this thing. So International Criminal Court, besides the International Criminal Court, there is the International Court of Justice. Then there is Permanent Court of Arbitration. Right? So these three institutions are very, very important from the point of view of pre. Very important questions have already been asked on this. ICC, I don't think. ICJ and Permanent Court of Arbitration has definitely been asked. Okay, so sports news, we have had a disappointing cricket match yesterday. Okay, thankfully nobody was watching late at night. Next, business news. So trade deficit widens to record 26.1 billion. We have it, trade deficit. We're talking about the current account deficit. Right. In any case, what we're seeing is they say that exports have increased. But when you look at the final data from the government, so exports is released, but let's say this is exports, so imports is so much. So imports is more than doubled over here. Right. So naturally, this had to take place. Wholesale price rises. So wholesale inflation is taking place. It is at 15.2%. So imagine 15.2% is a wholesaler inflation. So retailer is buying from the wholesaler, and then you will buy it from the retailer. So your inflation, that you are feeling right now, it is at 7%. The inflation your shopkeeper is facing is at 15.2%. Naturally, this burden will be transferred later on at some time, right? So this is not a good sign. Rupee slides 18 paisa, so closes very close to 80 rupees per dollar. European Union cuts Eurozone growth estimate, raises inflation outlook. I think yesterday I said if US inflation is increasing, so we will also have indicators of inflation in Europe also, right? So there's growth estimate and inflation increasing. So this is a problematic scenario, and China also, something like this is taking place. So we are on possible recession-like situation is emerging. Okay, so this is it. Sports news you should read. Basic idea, not really like you who balls basic events you should know about them. Okay, so this concludes our session. Thank you for streaming into our channel IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye, take care and all the best, and we'll see you on Monday. Bye bye.